M'aime Pélagie. By Kate Chopin. Chapter 1. When the war began, there stood on Côte Joyeuse an imposing mansion of red brick, shaped like the Pantheon. A grove of majestic live oaks surrounded it. 30 years later, only the thick walls were standing, with the dull red brick showing here and there through a matted growth of clinging vines. The huge round pillars were intact, so to some extent was the stone flagging of hall and portico. There had been no home so stately along the whole stretch of Côte Joyeuse. Everyone knew that, as they knew it had cost Philippe Valmont $60,000 to build, away back in 1840. No one was in danger of forgetting that fact, so long as his daughter Pélagie survived. She was a queenly, white-haired woman of 50. M'aime Pélagie, they called her, though she was unmarried, as was her sister Pauline, a child in M'aime Pélagie's eyes, a child of 35. The two lived alone in a three-roomed cabin, almost within the shadow of the ruin. They lived for a dream, for M'aime Pélagie's dream, which was to rebuild the old home. It would be pitiful to tell how their days were spent to accomplish this end, how the dollars had been saved for 30 years and the picayunes hoarded, and yet, not half enough gathered. But M'aime Pélagie felt sure of 20 years of life before her, and counted upon as many more for her sister. And what could not come to pass in 20, in 40, years? Often, of pleasant afternoons, the two would drink their black coffee, seated upon the stone-flagged portico whose canopy was the blue sky of Louisiana. They loved to sit there in the silence, with only each other and the sheeny, prying lizards for company, talking of the old times and planning for the new, while light breezes stirred the tattered vines high up among the columns, where owls nested. "We can never hope to have all just as it was, Pauline," M'aime Pélagie would say. "Perhaps the marble pillars of the salon will have to be replaced by wooden ones, and the crystal candelabra left out. Should you be willing, Pauline?" "Oh, yes, Citoyen, I shall be willing." It was always, "Yes, Citoyen, or no, Citoyen, just as you please, Citoyen," with poor little Mamselle Pauline. For what did she remember of that old life and that old splendour? Only a faint gleam here and there, the half-consciousness of a young, uneventful existence, and then a great crash. That meant the nearness of war, the revolt of slaves, confusion ending in fire and flame, through which she was borne safely in the strong arms of Pélagie, and carried to the log cabin which was still their home. Their brother, Leandre, had known more of it all than Pauline, and not so much as Pélagie. He had left the management of the big plantation with all its memories and traditions to his older sister, and had gone away to dwell in cities. That was many years ago. Now, Leandre's business called him frequently and upon long journeys from home, and his motherless daughter was coming to stay with her aunts at Côte Joyeuse. They talked about it, sipping their coffee on the ruined portico. Mamselle Pauline was terribly excited, the flush that throbbed into her pale, nervous face showed it, and she locked her thin fingers in and out incessantly. "But what shall we do with La Petite, Citoyen? Where shall we put her? How shall we amuse her?" "Ah, Seigneur! She will sleep upon a cot in the room next to ours," responded M'aime Pélagie, "and live as we do. She knows how we live, and why we live, her father has told her. She knows we have money and could squander it if we chose. Do not fret, Pauline, let us hope La Petite is a true Valmont." Then M'aime Pélagie rose with stately deliberation and went to saddle her horse, for she had yet to make her last daily round through the fields, and Mamselle Pauline threaded her way slowly among the tangled grasses toward the cabin. The coming of La Petite, bringing with her as she did the pungent atmosphere of an outside and dimly known world, was a shock to these two, living their dream life. The girl was quite as tall as her Aunt Pélagie, with dark eyes that reflected joy as a still pool reflects the light of stars, and her rounded cheek was tinged like the pink crepe myrtle. Mamselle Pauline kissed her and trembled. M'aime Pélagie looked into her eyes with a searching gaze, which seemed to seek a likeness of the past in the living present. And they made room between them for this young life. Chapter 2. La Petite had determined upon trying to fit herself to the strange, narrow existence which she knew awaited her at Côte Joyeuse. It went well enough at first. Sometimes she followed M'aime Pélagie into the fields to note how the cotton was opening, ripe and white, or to count the ears of corn upon the hardy stalks. But oftener she was with her Aunt Pauline, assisting in household offices, chattering of her brief past, or walking with the older woman arm in arm under the trailing moss of the giant oaks. Mamselle Pauline's steps grew very buoyant that summer, and her eyes were sometimes as bright as a bird's, unless La Petite were away from her side, when they would lose all other light but one of uneasy expectancy. The girl seemed to love her well in return, and called her endearingly Tante. But as the time went by, La Petite became very quiet, not listless, but thoughtful and slow in her movements. Then her cheeks began to pale, till they were tinged like the creamy plumes of the white crepe myrtle that grew in the ruin. One day when she sat within its shadow, between her aunts, holding a hand of each, she said, "Tante Pélagie, I must tell you something, you and Tante." She spoke low, but clearly and firmly. "I love you both, please remember that I love you both. But I must go away from you. I can't live any longer here at Côte Joyeuse. A spasm passed through Mamselle Pauline's delicate frame. La Petite could feel the twitch of it in the wiry fingers that were intertwined with her own. Madame Pélagie remained unchanged and motionless. No human eye could penetrate so deep as to see the satisfaction which her soul felt. She said, "What do you mean, Petite? Your father has sent you to us, and I am sure it is his wish that you remain. My father loves me, Tante Pélagie, and such will not be his wish when he knows. Oh," she continued with a restless movement, "it is as though a weight were pressing me backward here. I must live another life, the life I lived before. I want to know things that are happening from day to day over the world, and hear them talked about. I want my music, my books, my companions. If I had known no other life but this one of privation, I suppose it would be different. If I had to live this life, I should make the best of it. But I do not have to, and you know, Tante Pélagie, you do not need to. It seems to me," she added in a whisper, "that it is a sin against myself." "Ah, Tante, what is the matter with Tante?" It was nothing, only a slight feeling of faintness, that would soon pass. She entreated them to take no notice, but they brought her some water and fanned her with a palmetto leaf. But that night, in the stillness of the room, Mamselle Pauline sobbed and would not be comforted. Madame Pélagie took her in her arms. "Pauline, my little sister Pauline," she entreated, "I never have seen you like this before. Do you no longer love me? Have we not been happy together, you and I?" "Oh, yes, Citoyeur. Is it because La Petite is going away?" "Yes, Citoyeur." "Then she is dearer to you than I," spoke Madame Pélagie with sharp resentment. "Than I, who held you and warmed you in my arms the day you were born, than I, your mother, father, sister, everything that could cherish you." "Pauline, don't tell me that." Mamselle Pauline tried to talk through her sobs. "I can't explain it to you, Citoyeur. I don't understand it myself. I love you as I have always loved you, next to God. But if La Petite goes away I shall die. I can't understand, help me, Citoyeur. She seems like a savior, like one who had come and taken me by the hand and was leading me somewhere I want to go." Madame Pélagie had been sitting beside the bed in her peignoir and slippers. She held the hand of her sister who lay there, and smoothed down the woman's soft brown hair. She said not a word, and the silence was broken only by Mamselle Pauline's continued sobs. Once Madame Pélagie arose to mix a drink of orange flower water, which she gave to her sister, as she would have offered it to a nervous, fretful child. Almost an hour passed before Madame Pélagie spoke again. Then she said, "Pauline, you must cease that sobbing, now, and sleep. You will make yourself ill. La Petite will not go away. Do you hear me? Do you understand? She will stay, I promise you." Mamselle Pauline could not clearly comprehend, but she had great faith in the word of her sister, and soothed by the promise and the touch of Madame Pélagie's strong, gentle hand, she fell asleep. Chapter 3. Madame Pélagie, when she saw that her sister slept, arose noiselessly and stepped outside upon the low-roofed narrow gallery. She did not linger there, but with a step that was hurried and agitated, she crossed the distance that divided her cabin from the ruin. The night was not a dark one, for the sky was clear and the moon resplendent. But light or dark would have made no difference to Madame Pélagie. It was not the first time she had stolen away to the ruin at night time, when the whole plantation slept, but she never before had been there with a heart so nearly broken. She was going there for the last time to dream her dreams, to see the visions that hitherto had crowded her days and nights, and to bid them farewell. There was the first of them, awaiting her upon the very portal, a robust old white-haired man, chiding her for returning home so late. There are guests to be entertained. Does she not know it? Guests from the city and from the near plantations. Yes, she knows it is late. She had been abroad with Felix, and they did not notice how the time was speeding. Felix is there, he will explain it all. He is there beside her, but she does not want to hear what he will tell her father. Madame Pélagie had sunk upon the bench where she and her sisters so often came to sit. Turning, she gazed in through the gaping chasm of the window at her side. The interior of the ruin is ablaze. Not with the moonlight, for that is faint beside the other one, the sparkle from the crystal candelabra, which negroes, moving noiselessly and respectfully about, are lighting, one after the other. How the gleam of them reflects and glances from the polished marble pillars. The room holds a number of guests. There is old Monsieur Lucien Santien, leaning against one of the pillars, and laughing at something which Monsieur Lafirme is telling him, till his fat shoulders shake. His son Jules is with him, Jules, who wants to marry her. She laughs. She wonders if Felix has told her father yet. There is young Jerome Lafirme playing at checkers upon the sofa with Leandra. Little Pauline stands annoying them and disturbing the game. Leandra reproves her. She begins to cry, and old Black Clementine, her nurse, who is not far off, limps across the room to pick her up and carry her away. How sensitive the little one is. But she trots about and takes care of herself better than she did a year or two ago, when she fell upon the stone hall floor and raised a great bobo on her forehead. Pélagie was hurt and angry enough about it, and she ordered rugs and buffalo robes to be brought and laid thick upon the tiles, till the little one's steps were surer. Il ne faut pas faire mal à Pauline. She was saying it aloud, faire mal à Pauline. But she gazes beyond the salon, back into the big dining hall, where the white crepe myrtle grows. Ha! How low that bat has circled! It has struck Madame Pélagie full on the breast. She does not know it. She is beyond there in the dining hall, where her father sits with a group of friends over their wine. As usual they are talking politics. How tiresome! She has heard them say la guerre oftener than once. La guerre! Bah! She and Felix have something pleasanter to talk about, out under the oaks, or back in the shadow of the oleanders. But they were right. The sound of a cannon, shot at Sumter, has rolled across the southern states, and its echo is heard along the whole stretch of Côte Joyeuse. Yet Pélagie does not believe it. Not till La Reconnue stands before her with bare, black arms akimbo, uttering a volley of vile abuse and of brazen impudence. Pélagie wants to kill her. But yet she will not believe. Not till Felix comes to her in the chamber above the dining hall, there where that trumpet vine hangs, comes to say goodbye to her. The heart which the big brass buttons of his new grey uniform pressed into the tender flesh of her bosom has never left it. She sits upon the sofa, and he beside her, both speechless with pain. That room would not have been altered. Even the sofa would have been there in the same spot, and Madame Pélagie had meant all along, for 30 years, all along, to lie there upon it some day when the time came to die. But there is no time to weep, with the enemy at the door. The door has been no barrier. They are clattering through the halls now, drinking the wines, shattering the crystal and glass, slashing the portraits. One of them stands before her and tells her to leave the house. She slaps his face. How the stigma stands out red as blood upon his blanched cheek. Now there is a roar of fire and the flames are bearing down upon her motionless figure. She wants to show them how a daughter of Louisiana can perish before her conquerors. But little Pauline clings to her knees in an agony of terror. Little Pauline must be saved. Il ne faut pas faire mal à Pauline. Again she is saying it aloud, faire mal à Pauline. The night was nearly spent, Madame Pélagie had glided from the bench upon which she had rested, and for hours lay prone upon the stone flagging, motionless. When she dragged herself to her feet it was to walk like one in a dream. About the great, solemn pillars, one after the other, she reached her arms, and pressed her cheek and her lips upon the senseless brick. Adieu, adieu, whispered Madame Pélagie. There was no longer the moon to guide her steps across the familiar pathway to the cabin. The brightest light in the sky was Venus, that swung low in the east. The bats had ceased to beat their wings about the ruin. Even the mockingbird that had warbled for hours in the old mulberry tree had sung himself asleep. That darkest hour before the day was mantling the earth. Madame Pélagie hurried through the wet, clinging grass, beating aside the heavy moss that swept across her face, walking on toward the cabin, toward Pauline. Not once did she look back upon the ruin that brooded like a huge monster, a black spot in the darkness that enveloped it. Chapter 4. Little more than a year later the transformation which the old Valmont place had undergone was the talk and wonder of Côte Joyeuse. One would have looked in vain for the ruin, it was no longer there, neither was the log cabin. But out in the open, where the sun shone upon it, and the breezes blew about it, was a shapely structure fashioned from woods that the forests of the state had furnished. It rested upon a solid foundation of brick. Upon a corner of the pleasant gallery sat Leandre smoking his afternoon cigar, and chatting with neighbors who had called. This was to be his pied-à-terre now, the home where his sisters and his daughter dwelt. The laughter of young people was heard out under the trees, and within the house where La Petite was playing upon the piano. With the enthusiasm of a young artist she drew from the keys strains that seemed marvellously beautiful to Mamselle Pauline, who stood enraptured near her. Mamselle Pauline had been touched by the recreation of Valmont. Her cheek was as full and almost as flushed as La Petite's. The years were falling away from her. Madame Pélagie had been conversing with her brother and his friends. Then she turned and walked away, stopping to listen a while to the music which La Petite was making. But it was only for a moment. She went on around the curve of the veranda, where she found herself alone. She stayed there, erect, holding to the banister rail and looking out calmly in the distance across the fields. She was dressed in black, with the white kerchief she always wore folded across her bosom. Her thick, glossy hair rose like a silver diadem from her brow. In her deep, dark eyes smoldered the light of fires that would never flame. She had grown very old. Years instead of months seemed to have passed over her since the night she bade farewell to her visions. Poor Madame Pélagie! How could it be different? While the outward pressure of a young and joyous existence had forced her footsteps into the light, her soul had stayed in the shadow of the ruin.